Tonight at 10, the new government sets out its plans in the King's Speech with a promise to take the brakes off Britain. Amid all the pageantry of the state opening of Parliament, measures were announced to free up the planning process, renationalise the railways and improve the rights of renters and workers. Well, our political and economics editors are here with me in the studio with their assessments of the new government's plans. And among the King's Speech other measures, a proposal to strengthen the law on spiking. Also tonight, Donald Trump is expected to speak about the attempt on his life in the next hour. And we talk to the British sprinter going for gold at this summer's Paris Olympics.
On BBC London, a week on from the killing of Carol, Hannah and Louise Hunt at their home in Bushey, a family friend pays tribute to John Hunt's strength.
Hello, good evening. King Charles has set out the new government's plans at the state opening of Parliament. Amid the traditional pomp and pageantry, 39 bills were unveiled. Labour have prioritised economic stability and say they will boost growth and take the brakes off Britain. Well, there'll be reforms to the planning system in England to build new infrastructure and housing. Britain's railways will be renationalised. The rights of workers and renters will be improved, and there'll be a new publicly owned clean power company called Great British Energy. In a moment, we'll take a closer look at the government's measures on housing and transport. But first, this report from our political editor, Chris Mason.
No space for passing traffic on a day whose rituals predate the motor car. A, count them, 6-horsepower carriage, the King on board. Much of all of this unchanged in years.
Morning, Prime Minister.
But here's a bit not seen in a while. These are the plans to be unveiled today of a Labour Prime Minister. This then, their election promises, or at least some of them, today with horses, fancy dress and trumpets. A parliamentary official known as Black Rod, no matter how quickly she walks, gets the door to the Commons slammed in her face.
Black Rod!
To symbolise the independence of the House of Commons. And so to the speech, written by the government, read by the King.
My government's legislative programme will be mission-led and based upon the principles of security, fairness and opportunity for all. Stability will be the cornerstone of my government's economic policy.
A knowing smile from the new Chancellor. Being trusted to manage the economy and firing it up is key for Labour. And here's one big way they hope to do it.
My ministers will get Britain building, including through planning reform, as they seek to accelerate the delivery of high-quality infrastructure and housing.
Next, transport and a plan to give local leaders more power over local buses in England, and this on trains in England, Scotland and Wales.
My ministers will bring forward legislation to improve the railways by reforming rail franchising, establishing Great British Railways and bringing train operators into public ownership.
And what about dealing with crime and small boat crossings?
My government will seek to strengthen the border and make streets safer.
Big issues that were the old government's problem and now are for the new government to sort, or try to. Ministers also want to give people in England who rent their homes more rights and, eventually, eradicate smoking. And this is worth a glance, the civility of small talk between victors and the defeated. It looks like Rishi Sunak approves of the new Deputy Prime Minister's dress colour.
Order!
To the debate then, and the Prime Minister.
Secure Starmer!
Change is what this government of service will deliver. A King's Speech that takes the brakes off our economy and shows to the British people that politics can be a force for good. a rejection in this complicated and volatile world of those who can only offer the easy answer, the snake oil charm of populism.
Mr Sunak, the Conservative leader for now, said his party would be a professional and effective opposition, and he wanted to address Labour MPs.
If I may offer some words of advice to members opposite. On the government benches, life comes at you fast. You might end up being called to the highest office. And before you know it, you have a bright future behind you, and you are left wondering whether you can credibly be an elder statesman at the age of 44.
This is often a day for lighter moments, but more serious ones as well. The Liberal Democrats said Labour faced massive challenges.
They have a big job to do, and so do we. We will work hard on behalf of our constituents. We will scrutinise the government's plans carefully and strive to improve them. And, Mr Speaker, we will oppose them when we think they've got it wrong.
And plenty here think the government's got it wrong by keeping the two-child benefit cap, which prevents most parents claiming for a third child.
The decision not to scrap the two-child benefit cap shows Labour choice not to prioritise the immediate needs in the here and now of nearly a third of children in Wales who live in poverty. The decision not to fund it is a political decision.
And one of the new Green MPs in her first speech here set out what people who voted for her in Brighton wanted to focus on.
It was hard not to be affected by the strength of public feeling and distress about the climate emergency, the degradation of our natural environment, and the huge desire to defend social justice and public services. This Parliament must seek to deliver for them.
Tonight, have a guess which European leader Keir Starmer welcomed to Chequers. The drink familiar, even if the face isn't. Simon Harris is the newish Irish Prime Minister. Tomorrow, they'll both join more than 40 other European leaders for a summit in Oxfordshire. Chris Mason, BBC News.
So, as we heard there, the new Labour government says housing is a key priority. A bill on renters' rights in England will include a ban on so-called no-fault evictions. There'll be reform of the leasehold system, tackling high ground rents, and the planning process will be streamlined to get more homes built. The government aims to create another 1.5 million in the next 5 years. Here's our political correspondent, Alex Forsyth.
In the village of Fradley, this land could see more than 100 new homes built. Developers say it will help meet Lichfield's housing need, with homes for young people and support for green space and community facilities. But those living right next door disagree.
Envisage over 250 extra cars up and down a cul-de-sac.
In this cul-de-sac?
In this cul-de-sac, yeah.
Residents are concerned about the impact on the existing community.
Well, the infrastructure cannot take any more houses. There's no GP services. To be honest, it does not need any more houses. It's overdeveloped.
If somebody said to you, you're just being a NIMBY, you just don't want houses in your backyard.
Not true. We need houses in this country. We need affordable houses, but not to blight the people who live here already.
Lichfield's seen a fair amount of development. Across England, the government wants to see more, saying people will have a say over how homes are built, but not if they are. Councils will have targets. But there is some concern about the control communities will have, not least in rural areas. The government says it will streamline the planning process to get more homes built. They say in the right places with infrastructure to keep communities on board. But the tension could come when they run into local objections. And the question is, what will Labour MPs who now represent constituencies like Lichfield do then? Lichfield's new MP was in Westminster today.
When I talk to people across Lichfield, Burntwood and the villages, their major concern isn't just about what's being built, it's what's being built and the lack of infrastructure to support that. So I think as a government, when we're trying to push that through, making sure that the infrastructure comes alongside or ahead of housing, that's something that we should really champion and we should really celebrate.
It's not just house building. Today the government said it would introduce more rights for renters, protecting them from blameless evictions, and take steps to end leasehold for new flats. At this coffee shop in Lichfield High Street, they're clear something must be done about the housing market. Kit's struggling to afford somewhere to rent, while Sam's renting, trying to save to buy.
Looking at the rental properties that are available, I can't afford to move in and then still eat and pay the bills. I'd literally be able to afford the walls and that's it.
How are you finding it out there in the market?
It's massively overpriced. Some of the prices of certain houses, particularly I'd be looking for a 3-bedroom for my 2 children, obviously, and my partner. I feel like they should be a lot lower.
If I get my own place by the time I'm 30, that's great, that's incredible. It feels so distant and something that, maybe just won't happen. Fingers crossed.
There's no easy fix. The government's plans may be ambitious, they will be complex, and they could prove controversial. Alex Forsyth, BBC News.
Well, throughout the election, we asked you what issues matter most to you. And through Your Voice, Your Vote, you told us that the higher cost of living was one of your top concerns. Well, today, the new government promised to prioritise what it called wealth creation for all communities. Here's our cost of living correspondent, Coletta Smith.
We're a long way from the ceremony of Westminster.
My government's legislative programme.
Staff here in Bolton have one ear on this speech, but they're focused on the job in hand because every penny counts.
It's not like the world's against you, but it's just very difficult. It's very difficult to save at the end of every month.
Joe and his girlfriend have been living with his parents for the last 4 years because they can't afford to save and rent.
It's too much, way too much. I just can't afford it. I just can't.
I mean, they've been announcing there today some better protections for tenants. Is that important?
That is very important, because if you're living in a house that has black mould in, you're risking your health at the end of the day.
Macaulay's hoping to be able to buy his own place soon too.
More housing is good. I've seen that they're building on these new green sites. They're putting a lot more houses up in the tops near in Bolton.
More than a third of the children in this town are living below the poverty line. So for many, there's frustration that the child benefit limit isn't going to be raised to cover more than 2 children.
I've got 3, so I only get paid for 2 of them.
Okay.
So, and it is hard work. It should go up, but they need to put a limit on how many kids.
But I do understand that the more children you have, they can't just keep getting more and more and more money. It's not fair, is it?
Others are finding energy bills the biggest hurdle. Phil and Dorothy are currently in emergency credit on their gas and electric meters.
Both of us, we only get £249 a fortnight. So, if we're putting £8 a day in, it doesn't leave us very much.
The government say Great British Energy will invest in green tech and energy bills will come down in the years ahead.
It needs to be done now. Not in a few months, a few years. It needs to be done now.
And enhance employment rights.
Back at the factory, there's changes on the way for staff, and it's causing a headache for those in charge of this small business.
To have someone, appear through the door on day one and then end up with exactly the same rights as someone who's been here for 30 years, I find that a bit difficult. But it is very, very difficult to be a small business employing people on a fair basis.
I won't even be able to get my deposit for my house.
With so many struggling to pay the big bills in life, today's speech doesn't feel like the immediate boost many had hoped for. Coletta Smith, BBC News in Bolton.
Well, on transport, the government is planning to renationalise nearly all passenger rail services when existing contracts expire. There are plans for new rail infrastructure in Northern England too. Meanwhile, local authorities in England will be able to run the buses in their area, as our transport correspondent Katie Austin now explains.
The King's speech included laws which are set to usher in big changes to our transport networks. On the railway, the eye-catching nationalisation plan, which Labour had promised, is now going to be put in motion. Currently, a number of passenger rail services are publicly run, but where private operators currently hold contracts, they'll be brought under public control as they expire over the coming years, or the government says if they don't fulfil commitments. So don't expect it all to change overnight. A new arm's-length body called Great British Railways will bring together the management of tracks and other infrastructure and trains. It'll probably take at least 18 months to set up, although there will be a shadow structure. In the meantime, it will be tasked with improvements, including simplifying ticketing. Labour says its plans will save money and make things more joined up. Private operators, though, warn costs could increase. There was also a law announced on buses today, Britain's most used form of public transport. Services have been in long-term decline though. New powers will allow local leaders in England to take control of services in their area through a process called franchising, recently introduced in Greater Manchester. And a ban on new publicly owned bus operators will be scrapped. The government thinks this will help local communities get the services they need, but it might not work everywhere. The government made it clear today it will not reverse Rishi Sunak's decision to cancel the second phase of HS2 to Manchester, but a parliamentary bill will be repurposed so other rail links in the north of England can be built.
Katie Austin reporting. Well, another measure in the King's speech today is a plan to strengthen the law to improve the police response to spiking in England and Wales. The act of giving somebody alcohol or drugs without their consent is already a crime, but the National Police Chiefs Council say that at the moment it's a crime that's underreported. Here's BBC Newsbeat's Eleanor Sherwood.
It's a dangerous threat that's on the rise. The Home Office describes spiking as a traumatic crime that leaves many women feeling vulnerable when they go out.
Oh my God, it was awful.
Abby's 23. 2 months ago, she came back from a night out in Manchester and realised something was wrong. She told BBC's Newsbeat about that night.
I started to notice my vision going blurry. I was looking at myself and the mirror was blurry and my pupils just completely changed. So obviously I started shaking, I was sweating. I honestly, the sheer panic that I felt.
Latest figures show that the police received 6,732 reports of spiking in a year. Most regarding drinks being targeted, but 957 cases relating to spiking by needle. This new government announcement comes as BBC One's EastEnders is running a storyline on the issue, where one of the soap's most popular characters, Anna Knight, has her drink spiked on a night out. The story was commissioned to raise awareness about this national problem. But for the actress playing Anna and former Strictly winner Molly Rainford, away from the soap, this is real life and a real issue for her generation.
I actually am lucky enough that I haven't been spiked, which it shouldn't be luck. It should be, standard. But I know a lot of people that have, and I feel like the worst part of their experience that they've told me, it kind of during my research, if you will, for the role, is that not a lot of the time they don't really know what's happening to them.
Spiking symptoms include disorientation, being sick, hallucinating, memory loss and blackouts. The National Police Chiefs Council say the crime's underreported and cases can be hard to investigate because the drugs pass through the system quickly. Campaigners have welcomed this announcement regarding a crime where many victims often don't realise what's happened to them. Eleanor Sherwood, BBC News.
And other measures contained in the King's speech today include plans to devolve more power in England to local authorities, control of bus services, as we were hearing just a moment or two ago. There's a bill to improve water quality. Water company bosses will be personally liable for breaches of the law. There'll be a new border security command to crack down on people smuggling gangs. Martin's Law, named after one of the victims of the Manchester Arena bombing, would aim to improve security at public venues. And there will be a football governance bill giving the game an independent regulator. OK, let's get the thoughts now of our economics editor Faisal Islam and our political editor Chris Mason, who are both here with me. Faisal, to you first of all. Growth, wealth creation, the government say at the heart of everything they do, but it's easier said than done, I guess.
Yeah, so many mentions of growth in this King's speech, and every government says it wants growth. This government says it's its fundamental mission. So we can really hold that to account over the next few years in terms of whether they achieve that growth rate. How do they hope to achieve it? They're essentially sort of fiddling, changing with the wiring and the plumbing of how we make decisions in the economy, trying to remove some of the instability, some of the economic instability we saw after the mini budget, some of the political instability we saw after those Brexit years, some of the policy instability. They can now kind of plough ahead with some politically unpalatable decisions on planning, for example, using that massive majority. So that's the sort of plan. It can help. Is it a definitive plan? Definitely, to grow. some detail perhaps needs to be filled out. Some trade-offs need to be worked out. There are other areas where investors might be attracted, say, by the planning, but what will you do for house builders, for example, if they need the construction staff to build 300,000 homes a year, if they want to export to Europe, if, as in other countries that are going for growth, because they're trying this all around the world, by the way, where they're investing huge amounts of public money, whether in tax breaks or in public spending. We don't have the room for that right now. So is it an overall plan? It's not a quick fix just yet. OK, Faisal, thank you. And Chris, to you, 39 bills in this King's speech. It sounds like a lot, doesn't it? But how ambitious do you think this speech was?
It is a lot by any modern comparison. The length of the King's speech, the longest in 20 years, I think the 7th longest since the Second World War. So it's a hefty set of proposed new laws. Why? Well, lots of political parties have in their folk memory how they have judged their performance in government before. And there are some Labour old-timers who feel that Labour back in the late 90s didn't make the most of a big majority early on when a new government is often at its most powerful. So they want to be seen to be acting quickly. They want to make a case that says they've made lots of preparations in opposition for this moment. There are some who think that they could go further, they could be bolder or more ambitious, that row about the two-child benefit cap, for instance. But what they're trying to do now is convert the power of that word change that they managed to make so much of in the election campaign with great success from their perspective, and turn it into a reality in government. And that is going to be really difficult, and even more so if they can't be successful on that big question of economic growth. OK, Chris, thank you very much. Chris Mason and Faisal Islam, many thanks to you both. And just to say, Victoria Derbyshire will have more on the King's speech on Newsnight on BBC Two very shortly.
Hi, Ben. Yeah, we've got a top panel to digest what's happened today. We've got Mick Lynch, General Secretary of the RMT Union, and Nigel Evans, who was a Tory MP for 32 years until he lost earlier this month. He's been speaking tonight, actually, to Rishi Sunak about the party's defeat. Plus, we will talk to a Labour Cabinet Minister about when voters might experience that change that Chris was just referring to. Newsnight, BBC Two and iPlayer in about 7 minutes. See you then. OK, Victoria, thank you very much indeed. The head of the US Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle, is under more pressure to resign over the attempted assassination of Donald Trump after she said that agents did not guard the roof used by the gunman because it was too slanted. She said there were health and safety concerns about putting people onto it. Well, the former president is expected to speak shortly about the attempt on his life. Here's our North America editor, Sarah Smith.
Donald Trump always relishes the spotlight, and he knows how to use it to his best advantage. Today he's being shown around the stage where he'll speak tomorrow. He says he ripped up his prepared speech after he was shot and wrote a whole new one focusing on national unity. So has he really changed? We'll find out on Thursday night. At his first convention appearance, we could see how closely he's now being guarded. Look at all the Secret Service around him. But there are still a lot of unanswered questions about the extraordinary security failure that allowed a gunman to shoot at him, and calls for the head of the Secret Service to resign.
Obviously, there were security lapses. You don't have to be a special ops expert to understand that. And we're going to get down to the bottom of it quickly.
Do you think the U.S. Secret Service director should resign?
I'm going to call for her resignation as well.
The gently sloping roof on the building used by the gunman was apparently a safety concern for the Secret Service, according to the agency's boss in an interview with ABC News.
Should that roof have been secure, period?
That building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, you know, there's a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof. And so, you know, the decision was made to secure the building from inside.
That building was a little over 100 metres from where Donald Trump was speaking. Police snipers were positioned inside, looking toward the stage, but they were not covering the roof.
Look what happened.
The Secret Service agents who shot and killed the gunman were on top of a building behind Donald Trump, on a roof with a steeper slope. There is, though, widespread praise for the agents closest to Mr. Trump, who shielded him and rushed him off the stage.
My 4-year-old daughter could have walked up that roof, and so it infuriates me when they dog the people on his team, because those people are the real deal. They're the best of the best, and they did everything right.
Multiple investigations have now been launched into how the Secret Service failed so badly. while Donald Trump carries on with his campaign for re-election. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And there, to the delight of Republicans here, there's more bad news today for Joe Biden. There is a poll suggesting 2/3 of Democrats want him to step aside as the presidential candidate. And that really undercuts his argument. It's just the elite who want him to go and that he has the support of regular Democratic voters. And another big name says it's time he passed the torch. Adam Schiff, who's running for the Senate in California, says he has serious doubts about Joe Biden's ability to defeat Donald Trump. But Mr. Biden is still out on the campaign trail today and insisting he has no plans to step aside.
OK, Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Sarah Smith. Here, UK inflation was 2% in June. That's unchanged from May. Hasn't been below 2% since April 2021. Food and drink inflation fell sharply, but there were price increases in the services sector. And it raises doubts about whether the Bank of England will start cutting interest rates next month. Toxic blue-green algae has resurfaced on Northern Ireland's largest freshwater lake. Loch Ness supplies 40% of Northern Ireland's drinking water and sustains major eel fishing. But the Loch Ness Partnership has warned that the algae is back with a vengeance. Now, there's just over a week before the Olympics get underway in Paris, and in the run-up to the Games, we are introducing some of the Team GB hopefuls with sights firmly set on medals. First up is the athlete Daryl Neater, who tasted success in Tokyo last time round, but a lot has changed since then, as Natalie Perks now reports.
I feel like moving to Italy, this has been such a major part in my life, not just track and field, but life, like womanhood.
La Dolce Vita, indeed. A new coach and a new country have not only given Daryl Neater a new outlook on life, her work is seeing the benefits too. The freshly crowned European 100-metre relay champion has certainly been putting in the hard yards.
But it's going to be gold for Great Britain, Northern Ireland.
My coach, he absolutely went crazy this winter. You know it's going to be a hellish day. And, you know, that discipline, that dedication, it's not easy to wake up every day and be able to do that. But, you know, it is like a supercar. We're building something and we're working on a major project here.
And there's none bigger than the Olympics. Watching legend Shelley Ann Fraser-Pryce on TV at the Beijing Games lit a fire in young Daryl. Fast forward to Tokyo, she made the 100-metre final alongside her idol.
16 years ago, I would have never even imagined that I'd go to an Olympic Games, much less be lining up on the start line. One thing I always say is just be a little bit delusional and just believe in yourself and keep going, don't give up.
Daryl's part of a golden era in women's sprinting, with every race a blockbuster. She's already beaten some of the sport's biggest stars this year. It's not only those from abroad providing competition, though. She's the second fastest woman in British sporting history, with inevitable comparisons made to the fastest, Dina Asher-Smith.
When I do read second fastest woman in Britain, it's a bit like, oh, I'd love to be the fastest woman in Britain, really. Records are there to be broken. I feel like I've done amazing in the last few years to be recognised as who I am, and I'm Daryl Neater, and I've got my own achievements, but at the same time, I wake up every day and I'm hungry for more.
The stylish Londoner has a modelling contract and studied fashion at college. Her chihuahua, Melon, even has his own Instagram page. But fashion is for the future. For now, there's Paris and the desire to turn relay medals into individual ones.
The first Olympic Games I go to where I truly believe I can do what it is I want to do. I've grown so much as an athlete. I've come on leaps and bounds, and honestly, I'm really excited. I'm trying to stay relaxed. It would mean a lot to me to go there and do what it is I want to do.
Well, good luck to Daryl and all the Team GB athletes. OK, time for a look at the weather now. Here's Elizabeth Rizzini, and I think we're in for a very mini heat wave.
Very mini one. Blink and you miss it. It's going to be really quite brief, but yes, it will be turning warmer. And it felt a lot more like July today, didn't it? Lots of warm July sunshine. Temperatures returning to the seasonal average in the low 20s in Celsius for most of us, but it will be warming up a little further, particularly in southeast England and for East Anglia. In fact, for some, it could feel too hot. It's also going to turn really rather humid, but it's a brief blast of heat. It won't last beyond Sunday. By then it will be feeling an awful lot fresher, and it's always cooler, always wetter out towards the north and the west, and that's true too overnight tonight. We've got showery outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland into western Scotland. A few showers too for central and eastern Scotland and perhaps for the northwest of England, but elsewhere clear skies and some mist patches developing into tomorrow morning. Temperatures staying in double figures. It's a mild start to Thursday. So on Thursday then, we're going to keep those showers for Northern Ireland into western Scotland. A few showers too across the north of England. It will be cloudier here, but across these Irish Sea coasts, it's going to turn quite cloudy and murky with that humid air just starting to feed in. Best of the sunshine really for eastern Wales, for much of England too, as far north as Yorkshire. Here we could get into the low to the mid-20s for most of us, 27 Celsius possible in London and the southeast, and for most of us the temperatures will be above the July average. But on Friday, it's going to feel even warmer still. So we've got rain approaching the Western Isles. It's always cloudier again towards the north and the west, particularly down these western coasts with that rather warm, humid feeling air. Best of the sunshine across parts of England and into East Wales again. The mid-20s, we could even get to 30 degrees Celsius somewhere in London or in East Anglia on Friday, and it all leads on to a very muggy night, uncomfortable for sleeping. But then it's all over by the time we get to Saturday, because we've got weather fronts tracking eastwards, bringing behind it some much fresher feeling conditions. So watch out for some thundery showers on Saturday, perhaps a few more showers on Sunday too, but just look at the drop in temperature as we go through the weekend. Ben.
OK, Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed. That is today's BBC News at 10 on BBC One. It's time to join our colleagues for a look at the news where you are. But from me and the team, do have a very good evening.